to be here. It's a real treat for me, and I have to tell you that every time I get a chance to come down to Texas, there's something special here. This is a special place. I got to my room last night, and I opened my window and looked out, and there was that, I think it's a minor league baseball team right there. There's a game going on, and then fireworks went on after that, and I thought, man, these fireworks are for me. No, it's just a treat to be here with you guys. I'm anxious to share a lot with you, and I need your permission, because I know there's folks in this room that have heard some of the things I intend to share. Do I have your permission to be redundant if you've heard me speak before on something? Yes. I'm confident I can put some people to sleep. I do it to my kids. When it's like family council time and they come upstairs, I try to sit them down, and then they just kind of zonk off. So if you fall asleep on some stuff, I'm going to give you a hall pass. But I am going to try to cover some ground today. In fact, I have way more stuff to share than I probably have time. So let me jump in and share what I'd like to cover with you guys today. I wanted to go back and tell you a little bit about the story of this. I'm guessing some of you have had a chance to maybe watch the Genesis video we put out there. And I think I can fill in some blanks and maybe share a more human version. Although I think that's a great tool, and I think it's a very sincere representation of how it started. I'd like to give you my perspective on that. The second thing I'd like to do is hit what Terry just mentioned. You know, the notion of alliteration with all three of these words start with B and how cute they are. And sometimes businesses will throw out some sort of a slogan or some sort of a maxim that's supposed to represent things, but it's not sincere. There's a lot more going on the relationship between these three things and what it is I'm hoping to do with Asea throughout the world with all of you. And so I want to spend a little time on that. And then the third thing I'd like to do is pull some slides I used a couple weeks ago in Mexico at our Ascent event and share this concept of the next version of you as a kind of a closing piece. So let me walk you right into part one. This is my version of how this thing really started. And I think to understand that, you've got to start with my dad. My dad, Norton, really to me is founder with a capital F of this business. If I'm founder with a lowercase f, and he's really the visionary behind this. And you'll see that in just a minute. Dad's background, real quick, I don't want to bore you, but I just want you to know you're dealing with somebody who started this company that I think you could look at almost every network marketing company in the world right now, and you wouldn't find my dad's background. He put himself through college. He's the oldest of seven, the only one that went to college, paid for his own way, worked about 70, 80 hours a week in a grocery store called Safeway as a store manager while he went to the University of Utah. I found some of these old pictures. He was laughing when I showed him the slides. But that's my dad. And Dad was, how would I describe my dad? He was kind of, my mom says he's George McFly from the movie Back to the Future. Yeah, he kind of does, right? And so she saw that movie, she's like, you want to know what your dad is like? That's your dad. I go, Mom, you need some help then. But my dad was the kind of guy that he could have graduated from high school when he was like 16 or 17. He did graduate early. His mom pushed him really hard. Mom was a concert pianist, super bright. Like my grandma was crazy smart and really good. She played with Nat King Cole. She played with the Kingston Trio. I mean, she was a very, very capable musician. And in fact, my dad tells a story. I came home from school in Ohio one time when I was like 15 years old, and I heard someone playing the piano in the basement. And I'm like, who's playing the piano in the house? Like when I get home from school, I go down. It's the only time in my life I've ever seen my dad playing the piano. He just sat down and started playing. And I came around the corner, and I had no sooner seen him playing, right, than he stopped and walked out of the room. I was like, Dad, what? You know, and he got so tired of hearing the piano. He said from 6:30 in the morning till 10 at night, his mom was teaching lessons, and the piano was always going in his house. And she was an intense woman, really, really smart, really bright, but very driven. And my dad took on some of those same things. Put himself through school, took a job coming out of school with General Foods, which was kind of a natural pivot to working with General Foods. I don't know if you remember that brand. Kraft Foods bought General Foods, but GF was a massive, massive company during these years. And we moved to, when I was born, we moved to Seattle for 3 years. We moved from Seattle just outside of Philadelphia for a couple of years. And then he made his way to New York We lived in Connecticut. He worked in New York for 10 years. And when he was there, this is kind of an interesting reference to my dad that if time permits a little later, I'll get more into, but he was there 15 years but had 10 jobs. If you do that math, that's kind of interesting math, isn't it? He was moving around a lot. And what it was they were ticket punching my dad. When they find somebody that's got some talent capacity, they kind of just push you through a whole bunch of different jobs to ultimately move you to a place. And when we decided we were leaving Connecticut, Dad was running a north of $1 billion division on the sales side for General Foods in the beverage space. So these are some pictures of Dad back at that time. This is kind of how I remember my pops. Like, this is when I was a little boy growing up, and these are some pictures that are kind of funny for me to look at. I love you, old guy. The next thing that happened, he came home, I was playing basketball, freshman basketball team at school, all my friends, been there since kindergarten. He says, we're moving to Ohio. And I was a Yankees fan, I was a Yankees fan. I was just kind of dyed-in-the-wool East Coast guy, and my dad goes, we're going to move to Ohio. And I said, you're moving to Ohio. So I'm staying here. And he had been headhunted out to run a company called Hobart. Now there's a backstory to this, and I'm going fast today, guys. Do I have your permission to go fast?
Yeah.
Deal? Okay, if I go too fast, you can call timeout. But Dad had gone to General Foods and wanted to be a general manager over a larger piece of the business. And they said, well, you come largely through the sales and sales ops side, and most of the guys that are running businesses come from marketing. So he's like, all right, I'll go run another company then. So he took this opportunity to go run Hobart. Anybody know what Hobart does? Yeah. Have you seen it before? Like, if there's a mixer you can fall into, like big mixers, like scary size stuff. Dad ran, that's a $500 million company, and he was head of sales and service at the beginning, and then basically ran the company. He was executive vice president, but his bosses were outside the country, so he reported into them. And just to give you an idea, when he was named sales vice president, and then later went on to run. That's this kind of stuff they made. So we're moving from like Kool-Aid to like serious equipment. My friends in high school would come to the house, and like I'd have slicers and scales. It looked like I was running a deli at my house. And when my mom made a sandwich, they'd all make fun of me, like, "Are you going to slice the meat right in front of me?" And we had a toaster that you could have dropped from a 50-foot building, and it still would have worked. I mean, this stuff is like crazy industrial stuff. But Dad ran this company for about 5, 6, 7 years, I think it was, 5 years. And then when Kraft purchased General Foods, he was recruited back to go to Kraft in the Chicago area. So by that time I had graduated from high school, was off to college and doing some mission service for a while, and Dad moved to Chicago. When he was brought in over a $1.6 roughly billion division. At 1.5, it was called Channel. He had all of Mexico, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, Alaska, kind of some weird geography markets. Had all military sales. He had all C stores, so 7-Elevens and such. He also had all big box stores that were just starting to emerge, Sam's Club, Costco type stuff. And my dad took some big risks during this time. He kind of pivoted the way that marketing and sales worked together, and they ended up writing a Harvard Business Review article on it, having done some research. And when they pivoted from their core business to a different version, they used a lot of the stuff my dad pioneered, so they pushed him into a strategy role over the whole company. So Dad was head of strategy at Kraft Foods, reporting directly to Jim Kiltz, who I'll talk about in just a minute. You guys know the drill with Kraft. I mean, some of the biggest brands in the world. He was head of an effort to create efficient consumer response, which he could bore you with, I won't bore you with, but he basically took the company from 10th to first. He had a really good run with Kraft. And then they came and said, there's an opportunity for you to retire. They threw it out to the whole company because Kraft had been consolidating food companies, so they had a lot of leadership, and they said, let's just offer an early out. So he came home and said, I'm done. Like, I got what I need, I'm done. And they came back and said, no, you can't leave, you need to stay a little longer. So they threw more at him to stick around, and ultimately Dad retired. They moved to Park City, Utah, to the mountains right around the time of the Olympics, the '02 Olympics that were held in Salt Lake City. My dad's an interesting guy. I mean, there's not a project he's not willing to try. And so he designed his own home, and you probably can't see that very well in this lighting, but Dad kind of literally sat down and drew the whole home out, designed it, and decided this is how I want my house to be. You could park like 9 cars in his garage. I mean, Dad was pretty much done, let's be clear. He had had a very, very successful career. Aside from driving my mother absolutely mad by being in the house all the time, and I love looking at the faces of wives in the room that are nodding their head like, man needs to get out of the house. And you think I'm joking, like there's no hyperbole here. My mother was going nuts. Like my dad was trying to like tell her how to do laundry. And for those of us who would like to have a reasonably happy marriage, you don't need to tell anybody how to do laundry but yourself. So we started coming up to Dad's place on Sundays. You know, all of us kind of made our way back to Utah, where my grandparents were from. Gone to the university. I went to the University of Utah just like Dad. We all kind of came back to Salt Lake City, and it was a really fun time for us. We kind of thought Dad was going to hang the cleats up and just enjoy life a little bit. Something interesting happened, and at this point, it might help you to check in on these 2 jobs. When Dad was in these jobs for some 22 years, he literally worked daily with a guy that, if you know, the University of Chicago is a very respected university in the United States. The marketing institute at that college is called the Kiltz Marketing Institute. It's named after this guy right here, who is still living, very, very successful CEO. Dad worked with Jim Kiltz daily for 22 years. They designed and developed some of the most successful product launches in consumer goods for a long time together. And just to give you an idea about Jim, Jim was the CEO of Kraft Worldwide, Oscar Mayer, Nabisco, and Gillette at various times in his career. When he was brought to Gillette, Warren Buffett brought him into the company and said, this was from, I think, a Forbes article. When Buffett met Jim Kiltz in 2001, he told Fortune magazine that Jim Kiltz, who had turned around Nabisco prior, made as much sense in terms of talking about business in general as anybody I've ever talked to. My dad literally stood at this guy's feet for 22 years, and they're very, very good friends. In fact, Jim knows a lot about Asea, to give you an idea. He's not unaware of this at all. And the reason I tell you this is because Dad and Jim came up with some process disciplines that were very, very successful in Fortune 50 companies. Now, just to give you an idea what Jim thinks of my dad, I worked with Virtus for over 20 years. During that time, I grew to appreciate his capabilities and innate ability to simplify complexity and think strategically. That's my dad. You get my dad in the fairway of what he's best at, and he will outthink just about anybody I've ever met. He's extremely contingency oriented. He's constantly thinking. When I got in trouble as a kid, he didn't say like, "What were you doing?" You know what he said to me? "What were you thinking?" Right? So he was kind of like, "What are you doing?" No, he always said, "Tyler, what were you thinking when you did this? Let's talk about it." He was constantly pressing on my mind. Okay, my mom was always saying, like, "What are you feeling?" She's the real secret weapon in my family. Everybody gives credit to my dad, and I'll talk about her a little later. But my mom was like the emotional, like absolute central nervous system of our family. And my dad was more of the critical thinker. But to have a guy like Jim Kiltz, who I had a conversation in Manhattan recently with a friend of mine that's in investment banking, and he happens to have an alley of investment banking in consumer goods. And when I mentioned Jim Kiltz's name, it was like there was a moment of pause. It was like, really? And I'm like, yeah, my dad worked with him for 22 years. The guy is really, really respected in the business world worldwide. And for him to say this about my dad should tell you a little bit about who you had starting this company. Dad took those processes and created his own process called Strategic Link. It was linking strategy to execution. And said, you know, I'm retired, I'm driving mom crazy, telling her how to fold laundry. I'm gonna go out and start doing some consulting work. So he was just gonna kind of hang a shingle, go out and see if various people wanted help. The first person that saw him, by the way, hired him for 5 years, which is kind of classic with my dad. But to give you an idea what this process is all about, and I could talk literally without a bathroom break all day on just this process alone. It is an amazing, amazing process. But it's a strategy process that you can pretty much apply all the way down to a small group and all the way up to a large group. And it's got 4 quadrants, and each of those quadrants are broken down into 3 steps. And the truth is, there is no Asea without this process. You guys don't necessarily think about it on a daily basis, and you shouldn't. But I think it's cool for you to know that you're dealing with a world-class strategist who started this business, So when you connect all those dots, you ask yourself, why would a guy with that kind of background and experience get into this kind of space unless he had thought critically and strategically about where the world was going, where people were going, broad demographic trends, broad trends in health, etc. And I'm going to talk a little more about that downstream. So there's several steps here, and I'm happy to share this with anybody because the truth is this was just like a game board. Until you know how to play the game through this, it's not as helpful. But Dad taught this to me, and as you'll see in just a minute, it made a huge difference in my career. He did a consulting engagement for National Beef here out of Liberal, Kansas. And they had done a joint venture with one of the largest dairy suppliers in Europe called DMV. And Dad ran this and ran a biotech lab for 4 years. I remember joking with my dad, like, you're gonna go do what? He's like, yeah, I did some consulting work. They wanted me to come run a biotech company for them. And I'm like, Dad, you worked at Kraft. Macaroni and cheese is not biotechnology. I'm like, come on, man. And he's just like, you know what? Let's go do this. So one thing I love about my dad is just like, roll your sleeves up, unbutton your shirt, and let's just figure this out. So the next time I come to the house, biology, chemistry books, he's reading like stuff on pathogens and antimicrobial agents, and I'm like, really? And he's like, this is fascinating stuff. I'm learning something new, And Mom's in the laundry room going, get out of the house. So this is my background real quick. I won't bore you, but this is my family a few years back, probably 5-6 years back. I'll show you a picture later. They're growing fast, and I'm changing. That's me as a little boy right there. So I'm the youngest of these 4 kids, and if you're asking, I don't know where those pants are, but if I had them. And Vertus's collar, I think, is 8 to 9 inches long. I tried to show you this measurement, but you can kind of date that. My mom's is like the Flying Nun. So and my brother John, who is the most amazing dude, who's down at the bottom and gets angry every time I show that picture of him. So this is me and Dad when I was probably about, I was a small guy. I didn't grow until I was a junior in high school, but that's probably when I was 13 or 14 in Connecticut. So I'm the youngest of 4, come from a great family. I went to the same university as my dad. I started in the insurance industry. I worked for Mutual of New York. I had 7 years there. I was a financial advisor. I was a sales manager. I was a national director out of LA, and then a general manager of the state of Arizona. And then I started learning this process. So that dotted line across the top started influencing my career. Dad started teaching me how to think critically. And I'd go to dinner with my boss or my boss's boss, and I could volley with these guys. Like, I was able to get in, and he would say to me, I want you to think more critically about your own business. Get out in front of your boss. Get out in front of your boss's boss. What are they thinking about? What are they worried about? Make sure you're out in front of them. So he taught me the process steps, and I started to do it. I got recruited away as a vice president when I was 31 years old of a 100-year-old company, largely because of this stuff my dad had taught me. Within 2 years, I was a senior VP, and within 2 years from that, I was the chief distribution officer. So when I was in my early to mid-30s, I had a job that I should have nothing to do with at that age, and it was largely because of this process. At that point, I moved down. I actually worked for a company that was down here in Texas for a while, private equity owned by Goldman and Blackstone. And then I finally just said, you know what, I want to go teach this Strat-Link process. I love it. So we call it Strat-Link, short for strategic link. And that's kind of what I ended up pivoting out to do. Now, these two things converge, okay? So finding the technology, my dad's background and my background kind of came together when a guy that I knew introduced me to ultimately the technology of Asea. So what happened was when I was working for this company in yellow, I started teaching the strategic link process to people in the field. And one of the guys grabbed onto it. He was a high-end investment advisor, and he had invested in several companies. One was a biotech company. And he came to me, he says, Tyler, this company I invested in needs to go through the strategy process that you and your dad teach. Can you come teach them? Well, what was my dad doing? If you remember, if I go back here, he was running a biotech company. So I called Dad and I said, hey, listen, I just got invited to do a strategy engagement with a small business. I used to do this almost like a hobby. I just love teaching it. And I said, why don't you go with me? So we went and met the CEO and the CFO of a biotech company. And let me tell you a little bit about this engagement. This is kind of where it all converged. So this was referred by a good friend of mine. It was a small company in northern Utah, They had invested millions of dollars in research and patent work, and they were developing 2 products largely for the pharmaceutical space. One was made from salt and water. Okay? And Virtus was ultimately asked to sit on the board there. Not surprising. Anywhere my dad went, people were like, can we get more of you? Can we get more of you? So they asked him to sit on the board. Dad said, before I'm willing to do that, I want to see the research. Now remember, he had been running a biotech company for 3 or 4 years. So he said, give me the research. I think I can make sense of whether or not it's legit. And at that point, I was so focused on my job that I kind of pivoted, and Dad kind of took it from here. They want him on the board. I said, why don't you take this? I got a ton going on. So he kept meeting with them. Now, Dad started pulling research from these guys and calling like Harvard, Indiana University, UCLA, Claggett Labs. And he told me, he goes, Tyler, I'm calling very, very legitimate institutions and research. And every time he would try to get through to the lead scientist who ran a project on the saltwater product. And he's like, this doesn't add up. There's something going on here. These people are surprised. They keep saying, yeah, we didn't expect this result. We got this result. We thought this was no way this was going to happen. We saw something happen. So Dad starts getting interested. Now remember, I'm talking about a strategist who's run billion-dollar organizations. He's not a pushover when it comes to confidence and credibility and convincing. So he's doing his own research on this gig. And that kind of brings us back to what ultimately happened here. I go to the house, and he's got books strewn all about. And I go, Dad, what are you doing? Are you still looking at this? And he said this exact phrase to me. He goes, Tyler, these people do not know what they have. And I was like, what are you talking about, Dad? This is assault. He goes, I'm telling you, they don't know what they have. Now that's like a custom invitation for my dad. If someone doesn't have it, he's a puzzler, and he's going to figure it out. So he got really close to this, and ultimately, I came back to the house, and he had this device on the countertop. And I come downstairs, and he's got this gig on the countertop. I'm like, what in the world is going on? And I got to tell you guys that I had driven out of my dad's house after the last discussion, and this is the gospel truth. I said, you know, my dad's had a great run. I mean, he has a really good career. The last chapter may not be so good. It just may not be so good. But I'm going to give him that because, I mean, he gets up to bat, he cracks it, and it goes. He gets up to bat, so I'm like, you know what? I don't expect him to bat it. He's okay. But I didn't believe this for nothing. I thought this was madness. Are you kidding me? And by the way, think about it. 69-year-old dad, Salt Lake City, salt water product. I'm like, Dad, like I got an image in my head of you kneeling down at the lake and just scooping water out of the bottle, you know, cinching it up and throwing it in the box, you know. I'm like, come on, are you nuts? This is salt water. So it didn't help when he started putting it in mason jars, because you know what that looks like. I come to the house, literally, he grabs a mason jar, it'd be like something like this. He's like, here, drink this. And I'm like, no. I'm out. So I started calling it moonshine on him. I said, Dad, how's the moonshine project going? You know? Then I pivoted, because I think I was offending him. Then I pivoted to the stuff. So I started calling it the stuff. And that's what I thought he was. He had gone from McFly to the mad scientist guy, like, who had figured out time travel. I'm like, what is going on here, Dad? To this day, I'll get him howling laughing on a Sunday dinner, because I'm like, Dad, your hair was lifted off of your head. You started walking around the house in a lab coat. And he just laughs. My dad's funny. As he's getting older, he's 80 this year. And he just tears up laughing because he thinks about this stuff. But gosh, I thought he was nuts. Like the flux capacitor on the countertop. So, you know, I didn't know what to call it, so I called it the stuff. And I got to tell you, this is real stuff I'm telling you right now. I'm going to swipe the bottom of this gig. You see this right here? Can you see my pointer? Watch what happens when I do this. Right there. It said jewelry cleaner on it. And you think I put a little text box and laid that over? No, sir. That is on the machine. So he's handing me a mason jar, and I'm looking at jewelry cleaner. His hair's coming up off the top of his head. And I go, Dad, before I ingest this product, why does it say jewelry cleaner? He goes, disregard that. I said, I will not disregard the jewelry cleaner. He said, said, Tyler, they sent the machine somewhere in Asia for testing, and they wanted to head fake customs. They didn't want anyone tearing into it. So they just figured people would take their ring off and drop it in this gig, and it would clean their ring. So that's literally like early stuff on this deal. So I got to be honest with you. I mean, I had to go through my own genesis, as you can see, because this stuff was like, are you nuts? And this is my little experience. So I was at church on a Sunday morning, and we had it was kind of a lay ministry environment, so we just all kind of pitch in. And there was a group of us that would get together once a month to talk about the general well-being of the members. Somebody lost a job, we'd make a note of it. Somebody needed meals to come in because busted a hip or something, we'd make a note of it. And it was just once a month checking in. How's everybody doing? What can we be doing to help out? Could be something as simple as a widow needs her driveway shoveled in the wintertime. Any number of things. When there was a serious challenge, it always made the agenda, and it was just to bring everybody's awareness as neighbors and friends of what was going on. And this particular day, a guy that just lived down the street from me, who I knew had challenges, significant challenges, had been told by the professionals he'd been working with, you know what, you need to enjoy your family. I mean, pretty much we've exhausted what we think are the steps and options here. You need to just go enjoy your family. Now, to give you some context, his name is Jason, and Jason and I are very contemporary in age. So I was like, wow. I sat in that meeting. I don't even remember talking about meals or other stuff to anybody else that day. All I could think about was, honestly, you know how your kids like come home riding their bike and they just drop the bike and run in the house, and like bikes and trikes and all sorts of stuff out in front of the house? His house looked like mine. I mean, I got 6 kids. You drive by my house and it looked like a yard sale. My kids are leaving stuff out there. And I couldn't help but thinking, like, man, what would I be doing right now? What would I be thinking? What would I be feeling? So I went home, and Allison, my wife, comes into my office. I'm just sitting there kind of staring at the wall, and she says, hey, what's going on? I said, Jason down the road is like, he's in the very, very bottom of the ninth inning on this deal. I mean, they're saying, this isn't going to work. And, then you say, well, what do you do? So, do you take in meals? I mean, come on. That feels disproportionate, right? We talked about taking their kids so they could go have a weekend together as a husband and wife. And then what comes to my mind is moonshine. I'm like, wait a minute. Hold on just a minute. Meals brought to the house help, right? Taking the kids. But what if he's really tried everything he knows how to do to address this issue? And maybe my dad's stuff can help, the jewelry cleaner. So I called Dad about the stuff, and I said, Dad, do you think I got a neighbor that's in a pretty bad spot? And I'm not sure I understand how to connect the dots on this stuff, but do you think this would help him? I'll tell you what, one thing about my dad drives me nuts. He may be wrong, but he's never in doubt. Think about being a teenager with that. I mean, the man is decisive, and so he says to me, I said, Dad, do you think this could help? He says, of course it can help. Now there's the never in doubt, right? And I go, hold on, time out. I said, Dad, you speak with such certitude about this. How do you know? You don't know what they've been doing with this guy's body. You don't know. You don't know how this is going to interact with that. And he goes, well, I got the research. I know what I got here. He goes, it's not going to hurt him. It's going to help him. So I'm going to get into my pathway here, but I was living in fear. I was absolutely scared that anything I introduced to anybody else, I was so scared of this. I was just like, how do you do it? Now, to be fair, I was also in a place of doubt. Because you heard me, saltwater, Salt Lake City, last chapter in his book. I'm like, Dad, come on, what are you doing? Okay, now, what happened was this. I couldn't get out of fear and doubt. I was telling myself a story. I was like, I'm not touching this stuff. But then I thought to myself, what about the bike in the front yard? What about that? If I was in his shoes, despite my fears and doubts, would I say, bring it on? Okay. So, sure enough, he says yes. I said, would you make me some? He goes, yeah, I'll make it. I'm like, flux capacitor in the basement, hair's coming up. He goes, just shut up, come up and pick it up. So he makes me a camping jug, a 5-gallon jug of what is now Asea, but then was the stuff. Now, this is called transparency. If ever you were to trust a leader of a business, it's when they make themselves as real as possible. So here's what's real. I was so scared to take that thing across the street to his house that I went to the church leader's house. I went to Craig's house. And I knocked on the door with Craig. I got a 5-gallon jug of whatever. I don't know how to call it. I put it down on the porch. Craig lives 50 yards, door to door, facing each other to Jason's house. I knocked on the door. Craig, it's Ty. Hey, Ty, man, how you doing? I'm doing good, Craig. Hey, listen, I need you to do me a favor. I got something here that I think will help Jason. And I need you to take it to him. And he goes, well, you know he lives right there, Ty? I said, I know that. Back up. I said, back up. I said, I need you to take this jug over to Jason, but you can't tell him where you got it. He goes, well, what is it? I said, I don't know. He goes, well, time out, just a minute. You want me to take something in the jug and you don't know what it is and take it to him and you don't want me to tell him where you got it? I said, you got it, man. You got it. I said, listen, my dad believes that this can help him, right? I don't know, and frankly, scared to death. So, will you do it? He's like, man, you got something wrong with you. You want me to do this? And he says, you know what? I will. My first network marketing experience, and I get emotional about it, was Craig. Bless Craig's heart. I'm telling you right now, back up to my background in my career. I'm a senior vice president and chief distribution officer in my mid-30s of a 100-year-old enterprise. I'm not looking for a new job. I'm still trying to fit into the job I got. Somehow I head faked my boss into thinking I could do it. And now I got this jug of something from the flux capacitor. Like, I'm not looking to start this company, and I am not here today if Craig doesn't take that jug across the street. Now, if there's low probability and odds that Craig's going to take the jug across the street, what is the probability and odds that Jason's actually going to take some foreign object into his house and actually drink it? So I'm like, look, man, I did my best. It's better than a casserole. It's better than taking the kids. I did my best. Wash my hands. Sure enough, 2-3 months later, I get a call from Craig. This is the honest truth. Craig says, you sitting down? I said, don't start a call like that. Something wrong? He goes, no, actually something good. I just got off the phone with Jason, and his situation is changing and improving. I'm like, I'm waiting, right? Hey, that's great news, but I'm waiting. I finally go, Craig, did he drink this stuff? He says, Tyler, that's why I'm calling. He reached out to me and said, I'm through the whole 5-gallon jug, and I need to get more of the stuff. Where's the stuff? So I gotta be honest, like, I just saw a big old 8x10 glossy and my dad smiling at me. Like, I told you. It's just my life. Like, you want to talk about scar tissue, it's how many times my dad's been right. So I said, Craig, what are you saying to me? He goes, Tyler, I haven't changed anything at all in what he's doing. This is the only thing he's added to his world. And he's noticing a major difference. So before I call my dad and bow to the almighty, omniscient, omnipotent Wizard of Oz, I decide I'm going to call Jason. Now, I was in New York one time. I was telling the story in New York, and I hear this in the back of the room. I hear, and I'm trying to talk, and I can hear this. I mean, it's one of those rich, and I finally said, time out. I said, would you like the mic? And she says, now you want the credit. So I started laughing at it. I called Jason. I said, Jason, this is Tyler. I gave this stuff to Craig. To be honest, I was scared to death. I still am. I just got a phone with Craig. He says some things have changed for you. Can you please fill in some blanks? And he he gets quiet for a minute and he says, do you have any concept what this has done for me? And I said, no, I don't. He goes, Tyler, do you have any idea what I think this might be doing for me? And he just was quiet. And I said, dude, I don't. So he proceeded to tell me his experience. I'll bet you, if I made a bullet point list of the things he said to me, you'd probably go in with a highlighter and say, I've heard that one, and I've heard that one, and I've heard that one 50 times, and this was my first time. So put yourself in my shoes for a minute before you indict me as being the doubting Thomas, which I am, right? And put yourself back in this fear and doubt continuum. I'm sitting now at this really unique moment where I'm going, I'm not thinking about like the jug anymore. I start going through this, what's really going on? Now during this period of time, my dad had gone back and purchased the research and patents. He was on. When I tell you he's the founder with a capital F, please don't dismiss that, right? He deserves the credit, not me. But he's like, I'm going forward. I love this stuff. And to be fair, his original intent was to do something with it in terms of pharmaceuticals. Remember Jim Kiltz? He sits on the board of Pfizer. So my dad's best friend, and still does today, that was 10 years ago, I think he's probably one of the longest tenured board members at Pfizer. So my dad's like, well, this will be easy. It's like buying a house and flipping it. I got the research, I got the patents, got connections. There's something going on here. And so from that moment forward, I started hearing things that I'd never heard before. My dad started unpacking stuff like, redox. Did you guys realize there was a redox conference in Paris last week? Yes. Mark my words, people. I'm not a surfer, but one of the best analogies I've ever heard is when a surfer swims way out past break and is just staring at the horizon. And they're watching for a set. And we're 10 years ahead on that set. And if you're smart, you'll start to connect those dots. Because redox isn't going away. It's coming. The stuff in Paris is science, not products. How long does it take science to make its way into products? It takes a long time. So I got to tip my hat to my dad, whom I love with all my soul. He was ahead of the curve again. He started saying things like cellular communication, which of course I thought was my phone. I was like, Dad, what are you talking about? Redox biochemistry as a field, a burgeoning field of science and understanding how energy transfer happens in a body, how cells communicate with each other. All of this was then very foreign to me, and to some measure still is today, because I don't need to know how my phone works to be able to use it. I just know it works. One of the early scientists that was working on this said to me at a lunch appointment, this could potentially be the single greatest health science breakthrough of our lifetimes. And then I didn't put the rest of this quote up. Then he said, of 10 lifetimes. And I was like, come on, man. Now, be fair to me for just a minute. Dad went through the process of selling this to a pharmaceutical or not. That's a true story. It gets dramatized in the Genesis video, like, with the doors of the plane, and all that. I'm like, all right, but the truth is, he sat down in a room with a large company that looked at the research and says, we'll play on this. But as you know, they said, but you can't give it to anybody. At that point, Dad had shared it. It was going all over the place. People were knocking on the door saying, I don't know you, but somebody gave me this stuff. It was like my Jason experience. People were looking for more of it. And Dad's like, well, yeah, and he would just make it. That's another indication of my dad's heart. He was just like, yeah, there's people that need this stuff. He had become utterly convinced and convicted on it. And when they told him he couldn't share it with anybody else, to be honest, people think it was like this magnanimous moral decision, like he was, and to some degree it was, but it was almost like, well, people need this stuff and they're not going to get it, so I'm just going to say no to these guys. Let's go do something else. And within a matter of weeks, somebody had suggested to him network marketing and direct sales, and my dad, who never saw a challenge he never thought was worthy of him trying, just said, well, sure, we can do that. How hard can that be? Let's go. So this is a big deal, what happened here, and I tip my hat to him for it. Of course, I went back to this notion of, what if this stuff What a powerful 2 words. What if? I gotta be honest with you guys, like, I don't give a rip whether you buy this or not, because I didn't. I don't care if you're here for the first time, 10th time, trying to figure out what this means for you. I will tell you one thing I've learned in my last 10 years doing this, which I never dreamed I'd be doing. You're not here for you today. You think you're here for you today? You got a little something to do, like you got to unpack that a little bit. You're here for some Jason across the street from some Craig that you might be too scared to go talk to, just like I was. So you may need to step back and realize that this isn't about you, even though it's about you. Now watch this little play out, because I've learned this is the path of all of us. Once you start getting a little clarity on this, you start going to this new place of hope. But the problem is you don't jump right out of fear and doubt into hope. You start playing ping pong with doubt and hope. And you go back and forth. That's why the arrow goes back and forth. For me, it was like, come on, man. Your body's a pharmacy, dude. You can turn a switch in your head and believe whatever you want, and your body will cook it up. And then I'd go meet with somebody like Jason, and they'd say, here's what happened to me. And then I'd come back over to doubt, and I'd go, come on, man. Give me a break on that. Then I'd come over here, and I'd go, oh, man, what if? What if? It's funny, we're on a drive, we're on a freeway, we're stuck in traffic. We look over our heads and see a helicopter coming right over us. We almost immediately know what's going on. We're stuck in traffic. That's a life flight. And I don't care what faith you are, ethnicity, background, I don't care. We all have that same vibe that says, oh man, I hope somebody's okay. You stop thinking about like your appointment and you realize this is serious stuff that's going down right now. Somebody's hurt bad. You don't say to yourself as that helicopter goes over your head, and that's going to cost somebody a lot of money. I've never once thought that. Why don't we think that? It's because life deserves life, and we know it. We know it at bone marrow levels. So when somebody's hurt and somebody's in peril of losing their life, you start to have this sense of almost indignance about anything else. The prioritization shifts, and you like, the only thing that matters right now is life. So I want you to keep that in the back of your mind when you start thinking about if what I'm saying to you is worthy of hope from you. So in my case, I played back and forth, but what takes you from hope to a more firm place? If you think about it, there's only one thing, and it's experience. If you don't have direct experience with this, you can hear 1,000 vicarious stories, but you won't know. And for me, Jason was my first hash mark on the chalkboard. It was like, I got this one time. Was it enough to keep me from playing ping pong with doubt and fear? No, it was just one time. Then I started going out, helping my dad. He says, come help me with this. I need your help. You know distribution. You've run large corporations like I did. Come help me. So I started having more experience. I hashed 5 out, and I'm like, whoa. You know what's happened to me since? There's not a chalkboard that could fit that whole wall that I couldn't hash out. I've got so many of these hash marks playing out. I have letter after letter after letter in 3-ring binders. My dad prints them all, old school, 3-ring binder at his home. I can take you to the house, you can give him a hug and say hi to mom and say, where's the book? He'll pull it out. It's now got tabs in it. All the tabs point to different things that have happened. Interestingly enough, several of those tabs, long before we did any genetic testing, pointed right to the same genetic results. My dad is a puzzler, man. He's amazing. So what happens when experience starts to catch up on hope? When experience starts to support hope, you don't go back to fear and doubt. You start to move to this place, which is belief. The trial is over, and the verdict is in. When that occurs, there's this really interesting interplay between hope, experience, and belief. Every person you meet, you hope can be helped. Every person you meet is a possible Jason. And when it plays out for them, and it doesn't for everybody, and boy, do I wish I could tell you why it doesn't. I wish I could tell you why some people don't have a Jason experience. Wouldn't that be something? We wouldn't just be a wave, we would be the ocean at that point. But nevertheless, I've had enough hash marks on the experience side that hope, belief, and experience start to almost become one ball on this deal. They start to merge. It's a beautiful thing. It's true of any progressive thing in life. Kids, anything else. Hope, experience, and belief. And boy, it's hard, isn't it? Because fear and doubt are magnetic. They're pulling me back. They're pulling me back. When you lean into hope, experience, and belief, right, what happens is a demarcation line slices right between the red. And slowly, if you let it, starts to fade out. It starts to move out. You then become convicted, and let me teach you the great secret of network marketing. Conviction sells. Emotions buy. You don't believe? I can smell it on you like cheap cologne or perfume. Don't come talk to me about something you don't believe in. Don't ring the bell in front of me like you believe it. Now, if I said fake belief, get belief through experiences. I told you you're not here today for you. And just to give you an idea, you know anything about marketing at all? If you throw one ad in the paper and say marketing doesn't work, you're the same as the person that shares this with one person that didn't have a result and then say it doesn't work. Your job, just like a marketing campaign, is to share it across as many channels and as many people as you can. And withhold your verdict on this until you find people who it does help. And if my statement about the life flight going over your head has any relevance to you at all, when you find the one, and I guarantee you, you'll find the one, you will find that person that will come to you and say, if not for your efforts, my life is different. If not for your tenacity, my life is different. Now let me ask you this. I can sell widgets, I can sell computers, I can sell cords that connect computers, I can name 1,000 things I can sell. But if I'm in the business of actually introducing hope to a person like Jason at a time when he can't find it, much less buy it, I'm in a different business, and we are in the business of life. The foundation we have is called advancing life. The most sacred thing I know of is life. And when we are engaged in this business beyond our fears and doubts, we are engaged in the business of advancing life. You don't believe me? I don't give a rip, because my conviction sells. You stand in front of me, and I will look through the back of your head if you want to cross swords with me on this stuff. I've been around the world. It's not on trial. You know who's on trial? Your conviction, your commitment level. So be careful you don't throw this on trial. What you need to do is say, what am I doing here today? What brought me here? You believe in the divine? I do. I don't care if you do or not. You want to talk about the great cosmos, the stardust, whatever it is, you're in this room. And it's not about you, it's about this. Now, what happens when you move to this place of hope, belief, and experience is what I'm talking about. You can't sit still when you believe. How do you punctuate belief? How do you exclamation mark belief? You move. I can't say to my wife, I love her. I gotta prove that to her. So if I believe it, then it requires action. Belief without action is professing something and probably banging on hypocrisy. Don't say it if you don't believe it, and don't say it if you're not gonna do it. So let's do me a favor. Let's start having more intelligent conversations with ourselves about this process. Because some of the most unintelligent conversations I've ever had in my life are with myself. When belief and action start playing ping pong, now you got interesting stuff going on. Because you're dropping right back to experience. And that's my genesis. I'm not on trial, it's not on trial. I love people to make their own decisions. I don't think it matters to me if someone doesn't buy it, because I didn't. What matters to me is I want to find where that helicopter's going. I just want to help people and just say, somebody needs that helicopter, and if I can help bring it, then that's good enough for me. If I grow this company, if 10 of you that are in this room trying to dress on decide to buy the dress, I'm just thinking more helicopters are going out. Here's the why. This brings it full circle. This beautiful family happens to be of a very close friend of mine. My first recruit into the insurance industry became a sales manager more than 20 years ago. His name is Jeff Johansson, his lovely wife Monica, and pretty much we've raised our families together. I moved to Arizona as a general manager, he followed me there. This kid grew up on a farm and he can shovel grain. I mean, you want to see this kid work? I've never came to work on Mondays without seeing him with some blister on his hand. Like, what do you do on the weekends to destroy your hands? He's like, anything I can to destroy my hands. He goes, I miss it. I miss that kind of work. I got a text from Jeff one morning, same house, same neighborhood really as Jason. He says, I need to come by and see you this morning. I canceled a couple appointments. He came to my office, the same office I was in with Allison when we were talking about Jason. He no sooner sat down in a chair than he started sobbing and weeping like I'd never seen an adult male. And he said, Ty, my little Zach, he's got a problem. And we've been through a battery of tests, and they just came back and told us what it is, and it's not good. Now, you know that we don't run around from the stage talking about this product curing anything. Don't say it. It's not right. Your body is a powerful engine, and when you arm it with the necessary things to make cells do what they do, you're in a better place. I'm not going to get up here and tell you what his problem was, nor did I tell you what Jason's problem was. If you noticed how I've communicated about this, I don't stand up here and say things that are going to put you or this company at risk. Don't do it. Don't type it, don't write it, don't post it, don't Facebook it, don't any social media platform ever name a disease with this product at the same line, or you're putting your business and my business and this opportunity to lifeline and help people. You're hurting the business. So don't do it. I'm talking about a challenge. That's all I'm talking about up here. It's a challenge. Now, I can emphasize this one was a very real challenge. So we talked, to be honest, we prayed together, we visited, we really sat down and thought it through, and I said, Jeff, do you trust me? He says, of course. I said, you need to get Zach on see him. You can come right in and be comfortable. Come right in if you're in the back. So here's what happened. This boy was on the news. I mean, this was a tough situation. So I reached out to Jeff, and I said, Jeff, would you mind just sharing a little bit from your perspective about this? This is what he sent me back. He sent this in a text. He said, actually, Ty, no one, including me, knows how or why Zachary still lives. Even the doctors don't know why. He simply shouldn't be here. The one thing I do know that we did that was different from anyone else that we met going through this challenge is the fact that he drank Asea 2 times a day. Right? And anytime Monica and I thought about it outside the regimen, we'd have to drink some more. And when things got really bad for him and for us, that was when we got more disciplined about his daily intake of Asea. This is his words. So if you ask me, what did it do for him? Kept him alive. And we have him here today. So, that real for him? I hope that the why, you gotta check back in with the why. I gotta check in with the why. You make the why too much about the money and the rank advancements, and I'm sorry, Terry, and anybody else in the room, I want you to be pumped. I want you to be excited. I want you to be running around here high-fiving each other. I love all that, but I'd rather traffic in hope than hype. Okay? So use hope. Traffic in hope. Because that's what got me into this game, and this industry is indictable for hype. Overhyping stuff typically just leads to unmet expectations, and the sum of unmet expectations always equals disappointment. I don't need hype when I got what I got. I need to find people who have a negative credit balance on hope. All right, let's pivot to the how for just a second. I want you guys to understand that we cooked up, when Dad asked me to help, I said, Dad, I'll help if you just do one thing for me. And I'm going to take you through this formula. I said, look, when you're building these types of businesses, there's a lot of games being played on the money, that's the economics, and the ego. I said, could we possibly approach this a little differently if you want my help? He says, what do you mean? I said, well, for years I've been teaching this formula. This is something that Chuck Funky and I cooked up in our prior company. Our CEO and I worked together for 7 years. We were both vice presidents together there. So I said, look, here's the deal. There's a relationship between money and personal self-interest, right? And if you measure it on the y-axis, your motivations and what you're committed to. Sometimes you can get so motivated and so committed to your own ego and the money that you forget principles. And is money a principle? Uh-huh. But it shouldn't starve out other principles. Now, to be fair and to be clear, I have 6 kids. I'm a failure if those kids don't go out and do something decent in the world. That's the game for me. I love all of you, but you're not my kids. I got a responsibility to these kids. And so when I teach my children, I say, you want to be successful in life, focus first on principles. Now, if I said to you, what are principles? Not like examples of a principle, but what are principles? What would you say? How would you answer that? Somebody said, yeah, I don't know what that word means. What does principles mean? What's that? Integrity, that's a good example of one. Values, I'll take that. Morals, okay, that's a good one. Okay. Let me tell you my favorite one. Principles are concentrated truth. The truth. And that truth is so concentrated that it can be applied in several different settings. So let's think about it. The truth of integrity and or honesty. Concentrated truth, a core principle that can be applied anywhere. Can it be applied in my marriage? Mm-hmm. Can it be applied in my business? Can it be applied as a neighbor? Can it be applied when I bump across somebody's wallet at a store? Can you see how, so the principle needs to be the governing thing, the truth. Principles have to be looked at in the context of truth. And then the last one is capacity. And I said, Dad, look, let's do this. If somebody's a 5 on a scale from 1 to 9 in their motivation and commitment to money and ego, is that a good or a bad thing? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know till I know that score. Because when I know their motivation and commitment is higher to truth than their own ego and their own money, then I got something to work with. So the first kind of law of this whole model is keep E under P. Keep your ego and economic motivations under your motivation and commitment to principle. Now, you and I both know and have been ourselves this person, where the ego and economic commitments and motivations start to starve out our commitment to principles. This is blood pressure, folks. This isn't your height or weight. This is like how quickly it can change. You can start seeing an opportunity, and you can start running up your E-score. Man, I'm going to grow on this one. I'm going to grow here. I'm going to do this. This is dangerous. When E is greater than P, it's a very dangerous scenario. You got to manage yourself. I call this the EP ratio. I call this motive management. Learn to manage your motives. Learn to check in on yourself and say, am I doing this for me, or am I doing this because of a principle? By the way, is life a principle? Is hope a principle? Right? You can see our business is built around some really cool principles. So you can take those principles and you can go out and lead with them. Can it serve you economically? Of course. Do you got a shot to be recognized? Of course. Is there anything wrong with that? Nope. Just as long as that doesn't become the primary motivation and commitment. So keep E under P. Now let's talk about this model. Capacity talks about, if I got a bottle of water here, and let's say this is 12 or 14 fluid ounces, but there's only 2 or 3 fluid ounces in the bottom. That doesn't change the capacity, even though the actual is here. So every person you meet has capacity. In fact, every person you meet, in my opinion, has more capacity and wants to fill it. So my favorite person to work with is a 588. It's somebody who keeps their ego and economic motivations in check. They're highly motivated and committed by principles, and they want to grow. They want to build their own capacity. Now, this is kind of dangerous, isn't it? There's people who come to mind on this one. I was in Romania. I was in Bucharest, Romania, the second largest building in the world there. Massive, massive hall. I think there were 800-900 people in there, who most of which didn't understand English. You could hear a pin drop when I put up this slide. Because their country's entire history swings on the hinge of these types of leaders. And they were sober about it. I literally threw this up. I said, you ever seen this before? And they started barking out names and barking out this. They largely said politics, right? I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. We shouldn't be looking for politics to be that, right? I recently read an article called The Death of Truth. We need to be careful. That's my own little parenthetical aside. Truth principles should be first. What makes America great, in my opinion, are the core values and principles that underscore who we are. Okay? So, what happens here? Stay away from this. Stay away from this. Now, you might think, man, this is a great sword. This is a great sword. Great way to point this out to other people. This is a mirror. And don't make this a sword. The second you make this a sword, your E is over P. Because you're telling somebody else they got a problem. And guess what? You got your own problem. So Dad and I said, what if we did that? What if we did that? What if Chuck, Frank, Jeremy, and I, all of us sitting in council trying to move this thing forward, sit in a room and say, what's the EP on this deal? What's the principle? Where are the principles that make this the right call? Are we just doing this for cash or money or some other motivation that's ours? Can you imagine if you built an organization willing to commit themselves to that kind of a target? Can you imagine if your team would check on each other? Whether it was compliance, whether it was the way we promote the product, whether it was the way we talk about opportunity. If strategy is what makes you different, this can be strategic. But you can't head fake it, because people can smell it when you're gaming this stuff. So you got to go marrow deep in the bone and check on your own EP ratios and what's driving you. And when you start to feel your E pulling you back and the E's climbing, just check in on yourself, push the clutch in, slow down, and say, I got to slow down and check what I'm doing this for. The more serious you get about doing it for the right reasons, the more success you'll have. It will take you longer, folks. But the green chili beef and bean burrito at 7-Eleven does not taste as good coming out of a microwave as my roast on Sunday that's been cooking for several hours. So don't be afraid of slow roasting this thing, but do it right. It's going to taste better. Okay? You with me on this? Yeah. You guys like getting chalked into a snooze here? Everybody good? All right, breathe through your nose. Just do something with your nose right now. Pick it, do something. Wake yourself up. Breathe out. Sorry, I'm just messing with you. Okay, so here's the law. Keep E under P and drive up your C. Now, that's my target scores of 588. That became the central part of our ethos, the very top. Okay, but what I'd like to do is take you through the other part of the how, which is this believe, belong, become relationship. So I'm into part 2. And Terry, how much time do I have? Can you just remind me? Well,